If you're new here, hit that like button, drop a comment, and don't forget to subscribe for more epic sci-fi tales where humanity shocks the galaxy. Now let's dive into today's story. The air was thick with humidity, the kind that clung to the lungs and never let go. Lieutenant Daniel Cross tugged the strap of his medpack higher on his shoulder as he pushed through the broad leaves of Hathor 9's endless jungle. He hated this planet, everyone did, but he tolerated it the way soldiers tolerate scars. The outpost was carved into the green hell for one reason. It sat on the border between humanity's fragile holdings and the Serac Dominion's creeping territory. Cross was no soldier by choice. He had trained as a medic, a healer first, and yet wars didn't care about preferences. Out here, a medic patched wounds under gunfire and dragged comrades across mud while shadows moved in the trees. He was broad-shouldered but lean, his strength carried in wiry muscle, his face weathered by too many campaigns that had demanded both endurance and compassion. The jungle around him whispered with movement. Vines swayed without wind, insects hissed in a chorus, and somewhere deeper came a guttural roar that silenced everything else. Cross stopped, every instinct tightening. He had heard stories around campfires of Hathor 9's true rulers, predators so vicious even the Dominion feared them. They called them Varrock. He crouched by a fallen log, scanning the undergrowth. At first he thought the shape tucked against the roots was a bundle of shadow. Then it shifted. A pair of golden eyes blinked at him through blood-matted fur. The Varrock cub was larger than a wolf, even in youth, its body corded with muscle, fur-clawed limbs tucked beneath it. Scales armored its shoulders like jagged plates, while coarse black fur bristled across its frame. A deep wound split its flank, leaking dark blood into the soil. Cross should have pulled his sidearm and finished it, the regulation response. Instead, his training screamed louder. "You're dying, aren't you?" he whispered. The cub growled weakly, but it didn't strike. Instead, its head sagged onto its paws as though surrendering to exhaustion. Against reason, Cross slid his pack around and dug for antiseptic. He knew what the others would say if they saw this. Lunacy. These things were killers. Yet his hands moved anyway, steady, decisive. He cleaned the wound, sealed it with a spray patch, and wrapped a bandage across its ribs. The Varrock's breath rasped but steadied. Its eyes tracked him, not with hunger, but with something close to calculation. "I'll call you Grim," Cross muttered, almost to himself. When he rose, the cub staggered upright. Instead of vanishing into the underbrush, it limped after him, a shadow at his back. Cross should have been afraid. Instead he felt the strangest surge of calm, as though in saving the creature, he had gained an ally no one else would understand. By the time he returned to the outpost, dusk had stained the sky violet. The camp was little more than prefabricated walls wedged between trees, guarded by half-alert soldiers with mud on their boots. As Cross entered, the men at the gate swore. "Are you insane, Lieutenant? That's a Varrock," one barked, leveling his rifle. Grim growled low, baring fangs, but stayed behind Cross's leg. "He's wounded." "I treated him," Cross said evenly. "You treated it? Next thing it'll rip your throat out while you sleep." Cross tightened his jaw. "Then let it try. Until then he stays with me." The soldiers grumbled, disgust curling their voices, but no one pressed further. Cross led Grim to the shadows near his bunk, offering scraps of rations. The predator devoured them with slow deliberation, never breaking eye contact. The bond was fragile, maybe insane, but it was real. Night came heavy and suffocating. Cross sat on his cot, sharpening a scalpel more out of habit than need. The camp's generator hummed, lights casting halos through mist. He had just begun to drift when Grim's ears flicked and his body tensed. "What is it?" Cross whispered. The growl that followed was low, primal, vibrating through the earth itself. Outside, the mist brightened in narrow beams. Searchlights pierced the trees, cutting silver lines through fog. Shouts rose in a harsh alien tongue, guttural and commanding. Cross hurried to the wall and peered through the gaps. Shapes moved in the jungle, tall, armored figures with glowing visors. Serac Dominion soldiers, advancing in formation, their weapons gleaming with wet light. Panic rippled through the outpost as the alarm blared. Men scrambled for weapons, shouting orders. Cross felt his heartbeat hammering, not just from the sight of the enemy, but from the realization dawning like a blade drawn from its sheath. The Dominion wasn't here for conquest tonight. They were here for something precise. Their lights swept the compound deliberately, searching, hunting. Grim pressed against Cross's side, muscles quivering, gaze fixed outward. His claws flexed against the dirt. Cross's throat went dry. He had seen that look before, in predators circling prey. They were here for him. The night seemed to close tighter, the jungle swallowing the outpost whole. And somewhere beyond the wall, Dominion voices shouted a single command over and over again. Corner the healer. The night tore apart with the first shriek of plasma fire. Cross ducked behind the crude wall of the outpost as sparks showered down from impact. Soldiers scrambled, shouting over each other, their rifles glowing hot as they returned fire into the trees. The Dominion had not come with half measures. Their advance was relentless, deliberate, pressing the humans inward. Cross sprinted across the mud toward the triage tent, his medpack bouncing hard against his back. The wounded were already piling in, some dragged by their comrades, others stumbling on their own, clutching charred limbs. He set to work without hesitation, his hands steady even as the walls trembled with each concussive blast. But every few minutes his eyes cut toward the shadows at the tent's entrance. Grim crouched there, fur bristling, golden eyes glinting. The predator's body was coiled like a spring, muscles tensing with each new burst of gunfire. Soldiers gave the creature wide berth, spitting curses under their breath, yet none dared provoke it. "Why is that thing here?" one Marine demanded, clutching his shoulder wound. "Because he's keeping us alive," Cross snapped, sealing the man's burn with a spray patch. The Marine bit back a retort. Outside, the air shook with another volley. Cross stole a glance beyond the perimeter. The searchlights swept back and forth, drawing nearer. He saw them then, Dominion troopers moving with uncanny discipline, their armor slick with condensation, blades and rifles glinting like polished bone. They weren't storming the camp at random. They were tightening a noose. One of the corporals stumbled into the tent, his face pale. "Lieutenant Cross, they're calling for you by name." The words settled like stones in his stomach. He knew it already, but hearing it aloud stripped away the last illusion. The Dominion wanted him alive. A medic might not matter much to his own brass, but to an enemy that preferred breaking morale through fear, a captured healer was the perfect trophy. Grim growled low, pacing to his side. "Looks like we don't get a choice," Cross murmured. He packed the last of his gear and rose. "If they want me, they'll have to take me." He slipped from the tent and fell in with a retreating knot of soldiers. They pushed toward the tree line, aiming to link with a supply drop beacon deeper in the jungle. The plan was desperate, but staying in the outpost meant being overrun. The group moved fast, weaving between roots and dripping leaves, but the Dominion was faster. Their voices echoed in pursuit, sharp and guttural. Cross felt his chest tightening as he realized the aliens were driving them, herding them into a choke point. Ahead, the path narrowed to a ridge, sheer cliffs dropping into darkness on either side. It was a dead end dressed as a trail. The squad cursed as they realized. Cross turned, scanning the rear. Shapes closed in, visors glowing like predatory eyes. A wounded private stumbled, collapsing in the mud, gasping for breath. Cross knelt instinctively, hauling the boy up, ignoring his own rising panic. That pause cost him. By the time he looked up, the rest of the squad had scrambled across the ridge, leaving him cut off. He was alone. Alone except for Grim. The aliens emerged from the mist, a half-circle of armored hunters. Their blades hissed as they extended. One raised his weapon and barked something guttural, then switched to broken English. "Medic, drop weapons. Come quietly. You will live." Cross's sidearm felt absurdly small in his hand. His heart pounded as he put himself between the Dominion soldiers and the collapsed private. "Not happening," he said, his voice flat. The lead alien laughed, a rasping sound. "You are cornered. Human bravery ends here." Grim moved then. A streak of muscle and claws, he exploded from the shadows with a roar that froze the night. He hit the first soldier full in the chest, tearing through armor as though it were brittle shell. Blood sprayed hot across the ridge. The formation broke. Soldiers shouted, weapons flashing. Grim twisted with impossible agility, claws ripping a rifle aside, teeth crushing a helmeted throat. Cross ducked low, firing his pistol into the confusion, each shot a desperate effort to thin their numbers. The air was a chaos of light and shrieks. Grim fought like a living storm, each strike calculated, each movement efficient. For all the predator's savagery, there was precision in his fury, as though he fought not as a beast but as a comrade who understood where Cross needed space to breathe. One Dominion soldier raised a blade over Cross's back. Grim pivoted, snarling, and swiped the attacker aside before the strike landed. Cross had no time to be astonished. He dragged the private behind a boulder and reloaded, sweat stinging his eyes. When the last soldier fell, silence crashed down, broken only by the hiss of steaming blood on stone. Grim stood in the center of the carnage, chest heaving, fur slick with gore. His golden eyes burned in the moonlight as he turned toward Cross. For a moment, Cross thought the predator might leap at him too. Instead, Grim stepped forward, placing himself between Cross and the jungle's dark edge. He faced outward, shoulders squared, as if daring the next wave to approach. Cross lowered his pistol slowly, the reality settling on him like a weight. He had been targeted, cornered, and would have been slaughtered if not for the beast he had chosen to save. This creature, feared across the frontier, had chosen to fight beside him. The private whispered, voice shaking. What is it doing?" Cross stared at Grim's rigid form, at the way the predator's ears twitched toward the treeline, at the way his body language screamed of guardianship. "He's standing guard," Cross said quietly. Far off, deeper in the jungle, new voices rose. The Dominion was regrouping. The hunt wasn't finished. And Cross knew with a cold certainty that this was only the beginning. Cross pressed his back to the ridge wall, his chest heaving. The private he had dragged to safety lay groaning at his side, and Grim stood tall in the clearing, shoulders broad, claws dripping. The predator's breathing slowed as he scanned the treeline with a predator's patience, as though measuring the silence for the next strike. Cross felt the weight of that protection sink in. He had healed a beast out of instinct, and now the beast had shielded him in return. When the wounded private whispered his gratitude, Cross only nodded. His attention was fixed on Grim. The creature did not drift away into the jungle as instinct suggested it should. Instead it settled a pace in front of him, muscles taut as though declaring its choice. Cross swallowed hard, torn between awe and dread. The squad regrouped at dawn. They found him on the ridge surrounded by Dominion corpses, with Grim looming at his side. The men froze, rifles rising reflexively. Cross raised a hand. "Stand down," he said firmly. "He's not our enemy." "Not yet," one corporal muttered, finger tight on the trigger. Grim's ears flicked, his golden gaze sweeping across the Marines. He didn't snarl, didn't lunge. He simply stood beside Cross, his shadow cast long in the morning haze. Cross crouched to bandage the private's leg, speaking with calm authority. "You saw what he did. Without him, none of us would be breathing. He stays." The argument carried into the day. Some soldiers demanded Grim be put down before he turned. Others whispered that perhaps fate had sent the predator to them. Cross ignored both camps, focusing on tending wounds and keeping his pack stocked. He kept Grim close, offering water and scraps. Each time he reached for the beast's hide, Grim allowed the touch. Each time he finished a dressing, Grim leaned a fraction closer. The trust deepened not with words but with repetition. By midday the Dominion renewed its pressure. Their guttural voices echoed through the foliage, carried on radio bursts and amplified calls. One phrase came clear enough for everyone to understand: the Varrock had betrayed its kind. Whispers spread among the soldiers. Even the Dominion seemed unsettled by Grim's loyalty. The jungle bled tension. Every shadow felt like an ambush. Cross led the squad along narrow trails, his medics eye-catching each sign of exhaustion. He pushed water into parched throats, cut strips of cloth to bind sprains, and kept moving. Grim matched his pace, always a step ahead, head low, ears swiveling. The predator's presence silenced complaints. Even those who feared him walked steadier when his growl warned of danger. When they stumbled into another skirmish at the edge of a ravine, the pattern repeated. Dominion troopers surged from the undergrowth, rifles barking. Cross dragged a man behind cover and felt Grim slam past him, a blur of claw and fang. The beast tore through the enemy's flank, buying precious seconds for the squad to form a line. Shots rang out, precise, controlled. And through it all Grim fought not as a mindless killer but as though he understood the battle itself, pushing enemies into the squad's line of fire, circling back to guard Cross when he fell behind. Afterward, silence stretched heavy. Soldiers stared at the corpses and then at the predator licking blood from his claws. None raised their rifles this time. One even muttered, almost reverently, "He fights like he's one of us." Cross felt something shift inside him. He wasn't simply grateful anymore. He trusted Grim. And when he met those golden eyes, he thought he saw a flicker of something more than instinct, something that resembled recognition. Word of the Alliance spread faster than the patrols could march. Dominion scouts, retreating from failed engagements, carried tales of the Varrock that shielded a human. Their commanders raged, but the rank and file grew uneasy. To them, the Varrock were holy terrors of the jungle, creatures that bowed to no master. For one to choose a human was a story that unraveled morale. Cross overheard intercepted transmissions filled with disbelief and fury. His own superiors were no less troubled. A secure call crackled through, ordering the creature destroyed. Unpredictable. Dangerous. Liability. Cross shut the channel with his jaw tight. "If you want him gone, you can come out here and try," he muttered. None of the soldiers with him pressed the issue. That night, around a dying fire, he cleaned Grim's wounds again. The predator rumbled softly, not quite a growl, not quite a purr. Cross chuckled under his breath. "You understand me, don't you?" he asked. "You're not just some beast." Grim blinked slowly, lowering his massive head, the firelight reflecting off his scarred scales. For a moment the silence between them felt like an oath. The Dominion commander, miles away, paced before his warriors with fury etched in every line of his armored frame. The human must be broken. The Varrock must be mounted as a trophy. I will not have omens of betrayal corrode my ranks. He assembled hunters bred for this exact task, specialists who knew every trick to kill Hathernine's predators. He promised them glory, promised them vengeance. They marched into the jungle that night. Cross did not know yet that they were coming. He only felt the tension in the air, the way Grim's body stiffened, the way the jungle fell silent as though holding its breath. When the first trap snapped shut with a metallic clang, Cross realized the truth. The Dominion wasn't simply chasing anymore. They were hunting. The fire sputtered, shadows long and trembling. Grim's growl deepened, rolling through the ground. Cross rose slowly, his hand steady on his pistol, his heart pounding against his ribs. The hunters were close, and they were coming for both of them. The jungle burned with tension. Cross could feel it in the marrow of his bones, in the way the night carried no insect hum, no bird call, nothing but silence. Grim's ears flicked at every shift of wind, claws flexing against the soil. The predator's posture was no longer restless. It was poised, sharpened by instinct that spoke of danger closing in. The trap had sprung. A net of Dominion hunters spread across the forest, tightening with precision. These were not the common soldiers who blundered into firefights. They were trackers, killers trained to end creatures like Grim, and they came armed with tools designed for it. Cross understood that much in the way his heart pounded harder with every muffled rustle in the canopy. The first strike came from above. A steel spike whistled through the air and slammed into the ground where Cross had stood only a heartbeat before. He rolled, mud caking his uniform, and Grim lunged into the shadows. A scream followed, high-pitched and cut short by a wet crunch. When Grim re-emerged, blood slicked his muzzle, but a second hunter was already circling behind him. Cross raised his pistol, firing into the half-light. The round struck armor and sent the Dominion soldier staggering. Grim finished the motion with a claw that tore through the gap in the hunter's chest plate. They fought as one without needing to speak. Cross found his lungs burning as he forced himself to move with the predator. He stopped being simply the medic who healed after the fact. He became the soldier at Grim's flank. He ducked when the beast lunged, shot when the beast distracted, moved when the beast shifted. It was as though they were bound by a rhythm written in blood and survival. The hunters did not retreat. They fanned out, their voices low, confident, carrying a kind of ritual cadence. Cross could not understand the words, but the tone was clear. Triumph was expected. These were men who believed themselves above fear. He had to remind them otherwise. Cross dragged a pouch of herbs from his kit and crushed them between his palms. He smeared the bitter sap across a blade, the scent acrid and sharp. Poison improvised from the jungle's own arsenal. When the next hunter closed in, blade raised, Cross stepped forward, surprising himself with the boldness, and slashed across exposed flesh. The alien howled, convulsed, and collapsed into twitching silence. Grim circled back, golden eyes flashing approval. The predator fought with even greater ferocity now, as though emboldened by the sight of his human striking true. Together they carved through the tightening noose, leaving shattered armor and steaming blood in their wake. Still, the hunters adapted. Smoke bombs hissed from the trees, choking vision, turning the air into a haze of burning metal. Cross coughed hard, vision stinging. Grim growled, low and dangerous, but his form blurred into shadow as the fog thickened. Cross's heart jolted when he heard the predator cry out in pain. He lunged toward the sound, stumbling through smoke, finding Grim trapped beneath the snapping jaws of a mechanical snare clamped around his leg. The predator snarled, thrashing, but the steel bit deep. Without hesitation, Cross slid beside him, tearing at the mechanism with his hands. A blade sliced his arm, but he ignored the pain, driving his scalpel into the hinge. Sparks flared, metal shrieked, and at last the trap cracked open. Grim heaved himself free, bleeding but alive. He turned his massive head toward Cross and released a sound unlike anything the human had heard before. Not rage, not warning, but a guttural rumble that carried weight, almost like acknowledgement. Cross smiled grimly through the blood running down his arm. "We're not done yet, are we?" The hunters pressed harder, desperate now. Their commander, watching through drone eyes, barked orders laced with fury. He had not expected this. He had promised victory, trophies, and easy kill. Instead, his finest hunters were falling, one after another, to the union of a human medic and the galaxy's deadliest predator. The battle dragged through the night, each clash leaving Cross more exhausted, each wound on Grim patched hastily with trembling hands. Yet they endured. The predator fought with relentless endurance, the man with desperate will, and together they denied the hunters every victory. At last, silence fell again. The jungle floor was littered with broken bodies, smoke curling upward like dark incense. Cross knelt, panting, his vision dim at the edges. Grim limped beside him, blood streaking his hide, his breathing ragged. Cross reached up, pressing a steady hand against the beast's scarred flank. "You held the line," he whispered. "Couldn't have done it without you." Grim lowered his head, pressing it briefly against Cross's shoulder. It was not the gesture of an animal claiming dominance, nor of one demanding obedience. It was something closer to kinship, raw and undeniable. Far beyond the ridge, Dominion forces gathered, watching through fractured reports and fractured morale. Rumors had begun to spread, whispered between soldiers who dared not meet each other's eyes. Averic had chosen a human. The stories clashed with everything they had been taught, everything they feared, everything they believed. The commander clenched his fists as he absorbed the defeat. His hunters had been broken, his tactics dismantled. The human and the beast had stood as one, and that vision haunted him more than the loss itself. His pride demanded vengeance. He swore aloud that he would face them himself, that he would see the medic broken and the predator butchered before all. Cross did not hear the vow, but he felt the storm building. Grim's ears twitched, his body taut as he stared into the distance. The night was not quiet because peace had been won. It was quiet because something worse was coming. Cross tightened the straps of his medpack, checked the last rounds in his sidearm, and rose despite the ache in his bones. Grim matched him, limping but unbowed, golden eyes burning with defiance. Together they stood in the blood-soaked clearing, survivors of a hunt meant to end them. The air smelled of iron and ash, the jungle seemed to lean closer, and the promise of another battle loomed heavy. They had beaten the hunters. Now the Dominion commander himself was coming. The silence after the predator's roar hung in the charred air, like the pause between heartbeats. Smoke curled around shattered columns, the ruins of the alien outpost littered with bodies. Some human, most not. Kalen stood near the wreckage, his arm pressed against his ribs where plasma fire had grazed him, but his eyes were not on his wound. They were locked on the massive beast crouched just a few paces away, the apex predator that had carried him through every ambush, every betrayal, every night when the galaxy wanted him dead. Its fur was singed, its eyes burning with feral light, but its head was tilted toward him in something almost like reverence. It had saved him again. Saved his medic. Saved humanity's fragile foothold on this contested world. And yet Kalen knew survival was not enough. They weren't done, not yet. The alien commander emerged from the rubble, dragging one leg, armor scorched but still functional. His soldiers had fallen, his ambush had failed, but the gleam in his compound eyes was undimmed. "You think one beast changes the tide?" the alien rasped, voice shaking with rage and disbelief. "You think one human and his pet can defy an empire?" Kalen's breath was ragged, his body screaming for rest, but something deeper surged through him, a clarity honed by exhaustion and tempered by every life he'd sworn to protect. He could see Joran crouched at the edge of the ruins, battered yet alive, one hand pressed to a makeshift bandage around his thigh. His gaze flicked between Kalen and the Predator, as if watching two halves of the same soul stand together against the galaxy's disdain. The Predator growled low, chest vibrating with a primal warning. Kalen placed a hand on its shoulder, and it immediately stilled, like a blade sheathed but ready. "You don't understand," Kalen said, voice hoarse but unwavering. "It's not just a beast. It's not just me. Humans don't survive by being the strongest. We survive because everything we stand with, beast or brother, fights like hell to protect what we love." The alien commander raised his weapon, desperation twisting into fury. He fired a searing bolt of plasma, but the Predator lunged before Kalen could move, its body intercepting the blast with a bone-rattling impact. It snarled, blood staining its fur, but it did not falter. It crashed into the alien with unstoppable momentum, claws tearing through armor, fangs closing around the enemy's throat. The commander's cry was cut short in a spray of sparks and silence. When the Predator released him, the body crumpled lifeless to the ground. The battlefield was quiet save for the crackle of fire and the Predator's labored breaths. It staggered, wounded and weary, but still turned its head toward Kalen, as if awaiting his approval. Kalen stepped closer, his own pain forgotten. He pressed his forehead briefly against the creature's, feeling the heat of its blood, the tremor of its strength fading but unbroken. "You did it," he whispered, voice thick. "We did it." Joran limped forward, wiping soot from his face. "The Council will never believe this," he muttered, half in awe, half in dread. "They'll see it as a weapon. They'll come for it, Kalen. They'll come for you." Kalen straightened, his hand resting firmly on the Predator's shoulder. His exhaustion was real, his wounds deep, but his resolve was iron. "Then let them come. Let the Council see. Let the whole galaxy see. Humanity doesn't tame predators. We earn their loyalty. And that's something they'll never understand." The Predator rumbled in agreement, a sound that felt less like a growl and more like an oath. For the first time, Kalen realized it was more than a guardian. It was a partner. An equal. A reminder to the galaxy that the old scales of power were shifting. The night sky above shimmered with distant stars, and somewhere in that vastness, fleets and empires still plotted humanity's downfall. But Kalen no longer felt cornered. Not with Joran by his side, not with the apex predator watching his back. The galaxy would remember this day, and when it tried to break them, it would find something far more dangerous than a beast or a man. It would find a bond born of survival, of trust, of defiance against impossible odds. As dawn's light broke across the smoking battlefield, Kalen tightened his grip on his weapon and looked toward the horizon. The war was far from over, but for the first time, the galaxy's deadliest predator wasn't hunting humanity. It was fighting beside them. And that changed everything.